உங்களுடைய சைகையை பார்த்து நாங்கள் நிறுத்திக் கொள்வோம் பேச்சாளர்கள். முதல் பேச்சாளர் மேத்யூ பாக்ஸ்டர். He is a graduate student at the University of California, Berkeley. He is in the Faculty of Political Science Department. He is going to speak to us on Periyar's non-Brahmin political thought and the Communist Manifesto. May I request Mr. Matthew Baxter to come to the audience and then present your paper.
தோழர்களே, நண்பர்களே, கட்டுரையாளர்களே, பார்வையாளர்களே, தலைவர்களே, அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். Today I will be speaking on Periyar's non-Brahmin political thought and the Communist Manifesto. Let me begin. In 1928, the non-Brahmin political thought of Periyar's self-respect movement began to increasingly use a particular concept to articulate its social vision. That concept was called Samadharma. The exact relationship between self-respect and Samadharma, however, is unclear. Perhaps the earliest attempt to describe this relationship was published in Kuriarisi in August of 1928, an attempt which draws our attention both to the ways in which self-respect was thought to express Samadharma, while simultaneously defining self-respect and Samadharma in mutually exclusive terms. On the one hand, quote, "Wherever religion mixes in the life of common people, there the self-respect movement will condemn religion. To prevent the spreading of superstition among people, the self-respect movement attempts to courageously drive and beat customs which, from time immemorial, have been creating divisions such as caste, community, and clan, because of which society is not united," end quote. Self-respect is here defined as a force out to destroy divisions based on madam and jadi and superstition. Yet Samadharma, though offered as the message of self-respect, is defined very differently. Quote, "This self-respect movement, which is spreading wide, incomparable to any opposition, has appeared in order to spread Samadharma, which means that all those born as men are equals, regardless of custom, religion, or caste." Samadharma is defined here as a force which retains the differences of madam and jadi through a relationship of equality. How can we resolve this contradiction between two forces declared allied? How can self-respect, out to destroy madam and jadi and the supernatural, spread the principle of Samadharma, a principle which maintains different religions and castes and customs in a relationship of equality? In short, how can a principle which eliminates difference be defined in terms of a principle which is predicated upon difference? This paper suggests that we read the first Tamil translation of Marx and Engels' The Communist Manifesto, published serially in Kuriarisi in 1931 with an introduction by E.V.R. Periyar himself, as a way to approach this tension between self-respect and Samadharma. This suggestion may sound strange. After all, many have claimed that Marxism in India dismisses as backward ideas of caste and religion, as well as particular ways of being in the world. A dismissal which means, at least in part, that gods, spirits, and other supernatural forces can claim no agency in our narratives. However, I argue that, rather than see Marxism as allied with the emphases of self-respect upon anti-caste, anti-religion, and anti-supernaturalism, Marxism for self-respecters becomes a way to strategically reimagine the possibilities of caste, religion, and the supernatural through Samadharma. I begin by emphasizing the choice of translating the Communist Manifesto in terms of Samadharma, a choice that clearly emphasizes caste and religion over issues of property. I then discuss how the emphasis on caste and religion was used to translate the opening passage of the Communist Manifesto, a translation which suggests the importance of caste and religion not only to understand India, but to understand struggle in the world. I focus particularly on how self-respecters translated the specter of communism as the creature Buddham, and argue that the choice of Buddham to render spectre should be understood in terms of the nearly 2,000-year-old Tamil classical literary tradition which theorized the Buddham. I conclude by reflecting on the importance of the self-respect movement for its innovations upon Marxism, innovations which are of relevance not only for India but for the world. The first Tamil translation of the Communist Manifesto bore the title Samadharma Arikai. The choice of Samadharma to translate communism could not have been unintentional. Transliteration was a very popular way of expressing communism in Tamil script during the 1930s. Indeed, though absent in the title of the first installment of the Samadharma Arikai, all subsequent installments bear a cascading heading in which both a transliterated communism and socialism precede the title Samadharma Arikai. A common way of rendering communism into the Tamil language, as opposed to mere transliteration into Tamil script, of course, was through the word Podu-udamai, common property. Self-respecters often describe the principle of Soviet Russia as Podu-udamai, and it would be difficult to imagine that they meant something other than communism. EVR himself had often combined Samadharma and Podu-udamai in what one must conclude to be a rendering of communism. One need not go further than the introduction to the Samadharma Manifesto itself to see Samadharma and Podu-udamai combined in a rendering of communism. The very first line of EVR's own introduction to the Samadharma Manifesto runs, quote, "It is a truth known to all that there have been agitations and political regimes in the name of Samadharma, Podu-udamai Dharma in Russia, Spain, China, and a few other places in the contemporary world." But aside from this initial invocation, Podu-udamai does not reappear in the introduction. Instead, Samadharma Unarchi, the feeling or fervor of Samadharma, becomes the object whose history EVR describes for the Tamil reader, a history which includes the Samadharma movement, the 1847 Samadharma Congress in London, and the active Samadharmavadis more generally, including the Samadharma Revolution in France during 1848. In short, the decision to use equal dharma, samadharma, rather than common property, Podu-udamai, to translate communism was explicit and intentional. To read communism in terms of equal dharma was an innovative theorization of by self-respecters upon Marxism. The use of dharma suggests a thinking through madam and jadi as the supernatural, rather than simply rejecting them. We have earlier seen samadharma positioned alongside self-respect to suggest this very reading. And this emphasis on madam and jadi, as experienced by self-respecters, comes to bear directly on how they translate the opening passage of the Communist Manifesto. So I'm going to quote from Marx and Engels' original Communist Manifesto and then the translation, just the opening passage. So Marx and Engels, well-known passage. "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise the spectre, Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies." And now here's the Tamil translation. "Seeing the Buddham that has appeared in the world, everyone is afraid. What kind of Buddham is it? It is the Buddham of Samadharma. All the powers of Europe, that is the powers of government and religion, have joined together and are trying to threaten and chase out this Buddham. Religious authorities like the Pope, kings like the Tsar, famous ruling commanders, heads of political parties, and secret spies all have come together in a Bagridian struggle to destroy this Buddham." Like the translation of the word communist itself, the Tamil translation of the Communist Manifesto's well-known first passage does an awful lot of theoretical work. For self-respecters, the specter of communism is not haunting Europe, but rather the world. Similarly, provincial characters like Metternich and Guizot have been done away with, making room for figures more applicable to that world, like famous ruling commanders and heads of political parties. Furthermore, these figures in the world are not engaged in exorcism, as Marx and Engels claimed, but rather a Bagridian struggle, King Bhagrada being the mythical character responsible for bringing the Ganges, the central geographical marker of Hinduism, from heaven to earth. The projection of this Hindu idiom suggests that the world figures, who happen to be in Europe too, are plagued by madam and jadi, and that the appearance of Samadharma is a threat equally to the powers of government and religion wherever they may be in that world. Through the translation of the first passage of the Communist Manifesto, the self-respect movement would not appear to be provincially South Indian, but rather of world historical significance. I would like to focus particularly on the choice of Buddham to translate spectre, for, like in the translation of communism,